When 12-year-old Mira stumbles upon a fossil buried deep in the cliffs near her home, she thinks it's just another prehistoric relic. But when lightning strikes the rock during a storm, the fossil cracks open and a living creature steps out, a real Archaeopteryx with feathers like fire and eyes full of memory. As the ancient bird bonds with Mira, the world begins to shift. Time ripples. Climates change. The past claws into the present. Mira must uncover the reason it returned and face a buried truth about her family's connection to the first flight that ever was. Mira lived on the edge of the world. Or at least that was how it felt. Her house sat high above the cliffs of Arkan coast, where the waves never stopped crashing and the wind always carried the scent of salt and forgotten things. Her mother was a paleontologist who spent most days digging through layers of earth looking for bones. Mira spent most days following her shadow, waiting for something to change. The cliffs were steep and wild. Sharp rocks jutted out of the face like broken teeth and gulls circled high overhead. The land below was off limits to most people. But not to Mira. She had climbed those cliffs since she was 6. She knew every path and every secret ledge. And she knew the caves hidden behind the sea spray. It was in one of those caves that Mira found the fossil. She had been exploring after school, her boots slipping on the wet rocks. The tide was low and the air smelled like rain. The cave was small, no more than a hollow in the stone, but the light hit it just right. She saw a shimmer. Not a shell, not a stone. Something different. She moved closer, brushing away the sand with her sleeve. There it was. Wings. Not like a bird. Not like a bat. The shape was wrong and the claws were sharp. The feathers were faint but clear enough. It looked like a painting frozen in stone. She pulled out her phone, took a picture, and stared at it for a long time. That night she showed it to her mother. Her mother leaned in, adjusted her glasses, and said nothing for a moment. "Where did you find this?" she asked. Mira told her. Her mother nodded slowly. "That fossil is rare. Very rare. Possibly an Archaeopteryx." Mira frowned. "What's that?" "It's the first bird. The missing link. Part dinosaur, part bird. It lived over 150 million years ago. Only a few fossils have ever been found. But none around here." Mira felt something stir in her chest. A flutter like wings. She had heard stories of ancient animals and strange finds, but this felt different. Real. Her mother made plans to examine it more closely. They would go together once the tide pulled back again. But that night a storm rolled in. The wind howled through the cliffs, shaking the windows. Lightning forked across the sky. The power went out and Mira sat in bed watching the rain streak the glass. She couldn't stop thinking about the fossil. The wings, the claws, the way it had looked at her through the stone. At midnight something pulled her from her bed. She wrapped a coat around herself, pulled on her boots, and stepped outside. The storm slammed into her, the wind tearing at her hair. But she kept moving. Down the old path, along the cliff, through the soaked grass to the edge of the cave. She slipped through the narrow opening and stood still. The fossil was there. Lightning lit the sky and in that flash she saw it move. She blinked. The stone cracked. A long jagged line split through the fossil. Then the cave filled with light again as another bolt struck the rocks above. The sound was deafening. Mira fell back, hands over her ears. When she looked up, the fossil was gone. Not shattered, not broken. Gone. In its place stood a creature no taller than her waist with wings that shimmered like oil and eyes that burned gold. It tilted its head and looked at her as if it knew her name. Mira couldn't breathe. It stepped forward, claws tapping the stone. Feathers bristled across its back. The wings stretched wide, catching the glow from the storm outside. The Archaeopteryx was alive. It didn't roar or screech. It made a soft clicking sound deep in its throat. Then it stepped closer and stopped a few feet from her. Mira did not run. She felt no fear. Instead, she raised a hand and the creature tilted its head again. Slowly she reached out and touched the feathers along its neck. They were warm and smooth. Not like stone. Like silk. The creature blinked slowly and stepped closer, pressing its head into her palm. A shock ran through her fingers and up her arm. For a moment everything changed. She was not in the cave anymore. She stood in a jungle thick with ferns. Giant trees towered above her. The air was warm and full of sound. Birds called from every direction and something huge moved in the distance. The vision faded. She was back in the cave. The Archaeopteryx stepped away. It turned toward the entrance of the cave and paused, looking back once before disappearing into the rain. Mira stood alone with her heart pounding in her chest. She knew she should tell her mother. She knew she should be afraid. But all she could think about was the moment her hand touched those feathers. The flash of another time. The look in the creature's eyes. The fossil had not been dead. It had been waiting. Mira didn't sleep that night. She sat on her bed watching the rain ease into silence. The storm passed, but the feeling in her chest remained. It was like something had awakened. Not just the creature, but something inside her too. A sense that she was no longer living an ordinary life. The next morning her mother knocked gently on her door. "We'll go to the site after breakfast," she said. Mira nodded slowly. "Okay." But she didn't tell her what happened. Not yet. Something about the creature's eyes made her hesitate. It had looked at her with recognition. She didn't understand how or why, but it had chosen her. They hiked back to the cave when the tide fell. Her mother wore her field gear and carried a toolkit. She paused at the entrance and looked around. "Are you sure this is the place?" Mira nodded. Inside the cave the stone was still damp. The place where the fossil had been was just bare rock now. Not broken. Just smooth. Empty. Her mother crouched beside it. She touched the surface, then pulled out her flashlight and swept it over the stone. "It's gone," she whispered. Mira stood back. It cracked open during the storm. "I came here last night. I saw it change." Her mother looked up sharply. "You came here during the storm?" "I had to. I felt like it was calling me." Her mother studied her face, then turned back to the rock. "There's no sign of fossilized fragments. Nothing was chipped off. It's like it wasn't here at all." "But you saw the picture." "It was there." "I know." They left the cave in silence. Her mother was quiet for the rest of the day, reviewing old data and looking through her field notes. Mira sat outside on the porch staring at the sea. She half expected the Archaeopteryx to return. It didn't. Not that day. But something else changed. The wind shifted. The birds sounded different. The gulls were gone and strange shapes appeared in the sky, large wings gliding silently overhead. At school Mira couldn't focus. The chalk on the blackboard sounded louder. The clock hands moved slower. Time itself felt heavier. On Thursday, the dog from the next farm refused to go outside. It growled at the trees and barked at the air. That night Mira heard a high-pitched screech echo across the cliffs. She woke with a start and saw the Archaeopteryx perched on the fence outside her window. It tilted its head as she opened the glass. "I knew you'd come back," she whispered. It didn't move. She climbed out and sat on the grass. The creature hopped down beside her. It smelled like smoke and trees. Its feathers were brighter than she remembered, as if they absorbed the moonlight. She reached out again. This time it leaned forward and touched its beak to her forehead. A rush of visions poured through her mind. She saw a volcano erupt in slow motion. Trees falling in waves. A herd of strange creatures running across a wide plain. She flew above them, carried by wings that were hers but not hers. The air felt thick. The sky was pink with ash. Then she saw a human hand holding a smooth black stone marked with glowing lines. The stone pulsed with light and the Archaeopteryx flew toward it with purpose. When she blinked, the vision faded. The creature stepped back. It stared at her for a long moment, then let out a sound, sharp and rising like a question. "I don't know what it means," she said. "But I think you're showing me something important." It spread its wings and lifted into the night air. She watched it go until it vanished over the cliffs. The next day her mother found a second fossil fragment in her research case. She hadn't packed it. It looked like a claw. Not fossilized but recent. Fresh. She turned it over in her hands and said nothing. More strange things followed. The museum down in the city reported that one of its oldest fossil displays had gone missing. The case was locked, but inside the bones had vanished. Only the label remained. A team of scientists studying migration patterns along the coast reported that birds had altered their routes. One group of hawks circled the same patch of forest for 3 days without moving on. Mira felt like the world was trying to talk. One morning she walked the cliffs again. The Archaeopteryx appeared from the fog and landed beside her. It chirped softly, then began walking along the edge. Mira followed. They walked for nearly an hour. Then they came to a part of the cliffs Mira had never seen. The stone curved into a bowl shape with ridges marked by deep lines. In the center stood a pillar of black rock no taller than a child. On its surface glowed the same patterns she had seen in her vision. The creature stepped forward and tapped the stone with its claw. Light spread outward in veins. The ground trembled. Then the stone opened like a flower and revealed something inside. It was an egg. Not fossilized. Not stone. Alive. Mira gasped. The Archaeopteryx looked at her, then at the egg. She knelt beside it. It pulsed with a steady rhythm. Like a heartbeat. Then words appeared in her mind. Protect the first flame. Time will fight to reclaim it. She looked at the creature. You were never just a fossil. The Archaeopteryx let out a long, low sound that made her chest tighten. She didn't understand everything, but she understood enough. This creature had survived across time. Its purpose was to bring back something the world had forgotten. And Mira had been chosen to help. As she reached toward the egg, the vision returned. She saw herself standing in the middle of an ancient valley holding the egg while the sky opened above her. Thunder rolled. Creatures crawled from broken ground. Men in strange suits chased her through burning trees. But through it all she held the egg. The Archaeopteryx flew ahead guiding her. Always guiding. Then the vision ended. Mira sat on the ground and stared at the egg. It was warm against her hand. Behind her the creature stood still. From that day forward Mira returned to the hidden spot each morning. The egg remained unchanged but she could feel it growing stronger. She brought food for the Archaeopteryx and read old science books by the light of the rising sun. She learned its movements. The way it watched the wind. The way it crouched before storms. Each time she touched the egg she saw more. Cities underwater. Ice spreading across the land. Mountains rising in minutes. The earth remembering its past. One morning she found something new beside the pillar. A second Archaeopteryx. Smaller. Younger. Its feathers were pale but shimmered like starlight. It made no sound but followed Mira as she moved. The first one circled overhead before landing beside it. They bowed to each other then looked at Mira. She understood then. This wasn't just a return. It was a rebirth. Something ancient was waking. Not just creatures but the balance of time itself. The world had forgotten the first flyers. The line between past and present had blurred. Now it was Mira's task to protect that line. Her mother noticed the change in her. Mira no longer stayed up watching cartoons or texting friends. She read journals about deep time and evolutionary gaps. She asked questions her mother couldn't answer. Then she showed her the egg. Her mother stared in silence. Then knelt beside it and touched the stone. She whispered one word. Impossible. The older Archaeopteryx stepped from the shadows. Her mother flinched but didn't move. The creature walked to her and let her touch its wing. Tears filled her mother's eyes. This is everything we've ever looked for, she said. Mira shook her head. This is only the beginning. The sky darkened long before sunset. Heavy clouds rolled in from the ocean with a strange stillness. The wind didn't howl. It paused. Waiting. Mira stood on the cliffs with the egg wrapped in a layer of moss and cloth. The older Archaeopteryx circled overhead while the younger one stayed close beside her feet. Her mother stood behind her, silent, eyes wide. The stone pillar no longer glowed. The patterns had faded into the rock as if their message had been delivered. What's happening? Her mother asked. I think time is trying to fix itself, Mira said. The wind shifted and a sound rose from the trees below. It wasn't thunder. It was softer. Like humming metal or machines moving through soil. Mira looked toward the horizon. A ripple passed through the air, bending the clouds and warping the light. Her breath caught in her throat. A crack appeared in the sky. Not a tear in the clouds but in something deeper. As if the fabric of the world had been pulled too tight and now it was splitting open. From the crack dropped shapes. They weren't birds. They weren't planes. They were men. Wrapped in dark suits that didn't shine or reflect light. Their eyes glowed dull green. Each one carried a staff shaped like a claw. As they touched the ground they moved in perfect silence. Mira backed away, holding the egg tight to her chest. The older Archaeopteryx shrieked and dove. Its wings cut the air like blades. The figures didn't flinch. One raised its clawed staff. A beam of light fired into the sky. It missed the bird but split a nearby rock in two. Mira's mother grabbed her shoulder. We have to run. No, Mira said. This is why I'm here. The figures moved forward with steady steps. The younger Archaeopteryx stood between them and Mira, its feathers rising. A voice echoed in Myra's head. "Give us the egg. Time must remain pure." She didn't answer. The lead figure stepped closer. The ground beneath it shifted. Flowers turned to dust. Leaves shriveled. The air grew dry. "You were not meant to carry this," the voice said again. "You have touched what belongs to the beginning. We are the stewards of the fold. We erase what disturbs the order." Mira looked down at the egg. It pulsed stronger now. Heat spread through her arms and chest. Not burning. Alive. She looked up. "You can't erase what remembers itself." The older Archaeopteryx screamed. The sound split the air. The young one leapt forward, its wings spread wide. The stewards raised their staffs. Mira ran. She darted down the cliff path, her mother close behind. The Archaeopteryx flew above them, one on each side guarding their flight. The air behind them cracked with light as the stewards followed. The cliffs ended in a dense patch of forest. Mira sprinted between the trees, ducking branches and jumping roots. The egg grew heavier in her arms. Then she stumbled. She fell to her knees. The egg rolled forward and hit a flat stone. Light exploded from it. A circle of fire and wind spiraled out. The trees bent backward. The stewards stopped at the edge, their glowing eyes dimming. Mira stood slowly. The egg floated above the stone now. It turned once in the air, then hovered still. From within the light emerged an image. A forest, not this one. A forest from before. Giant ferns. Towering trees. Air so thick it shimmered. Flying between the trunks were dozens of Archaeopteryx. Their colors burned. Their wings beat with music. The stewards stepped back. "This is the first memory," Mira said. "You can't erase it." The older Archaeopteryx landed beside her and touched its wing to the stone. The light changed. Now Mira saw humans. Ancient. Covered in paints. Standing in a circle around a glowing stone. At the center stood an Archaeopteryx, and beside it a girl who looked just like her. She wasn't seeing history. She was seeing inheritance. The egg cracked. A soft sound like breath escaped it. A small shape emerged, wet and glowing. A new Archaeopteryx stretched its wings for the first time. Its feathers were silver like starlight. Mira stepped back. The stewards began to shake. Their forms flickered. The green light in their eyes dimmed. "You were wrong," Mira said. "This isn't a mistake. It's a return." The trees lit from within. Roots pulsed. The ground shook. Time was folding but not collapsing. It was opening. The stewards raised their arms one last time, but their bodies cracked. Thin lines split their suits. The forest pushed them away. One by one they vanished like dust in the wind. Silence returned. The new Archaeopteryx climbed onto Myra's arm. It looked into her eyes. She felt nothing but warmth. Then something more. Understanding. Not in words. In memory. This was not the end of a story. It was the rebirth of something older than time. Something that had waited through extinction and silence and stone. Mira held the creature close. It was hers but not hers. A gift. A promise. Her mother knelt beside her and placed a hand on her shoulder. "You saved it," she whispered. Mira shook her head. We saved each other. Above them the older Archaeopteryx circled once more before vanishing into the sky. The trees that had glowed with ancient light slowly dimmed. The air returned to stillness. Not the stillness of fear but of something sacred. Mira stood on the stone where the egg had cracked open, the young Archaeopteryx resting in her hands. Its feathers were nearly dry now. Its eyes were open wide and bright. It made a soft, whistling sound that reminded her of the wind in the canyon before a storm. Her mother sat nearby, silent and watching. No one moved for a long time. Then the older Archaeopteryx returned. It landed beside the young one, looked at Mira once, and then stepped back as if giving space. Mira knelt and let the younger one walk toward it. The two creatures stood face to face. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the young one touched its beak to the older's forehead. A flash of light burst from the contact. Not blinding, just sudden. Mira flinched and looked away. When she looked back, the older Archaeopteryx had changed. Its feathers, once dark with age and weight, now glowed faintly. Its wings seemed lighter. A few faded feathers had turned bright, like sunlight on snow. It let out a long, rising call. The young one answered. Mira felt something stir in her chest. They're bonded now, her mother said. The new life connects with the memory of the old. It's how their kind survives. Not by blood but by memory. Mira nodded slowly. They're passing it on. For the next few hours, they stayed in the clearing. The older Archaeopteryx flew in wide circles while the younger one tried short glides from branch to branch. Mira watched, learning from the way their wings moved, the way they seemed to feel the shape of the air. Her mother collected samples from the glowing stone, took readings of the pulse from the earth, and filled a notebook with scribbles. But Mira wasn't focused on the science. She was listening. There were no voices. No sounds like language. Just wind, trees, feathers, and feeling. Late that afternoon, Mira and her mother returned to the house. The younger Archaeopteryx followed them. It perched on the porch rail, watched the sunset, and remained there all night. Word of strange sightings began to spread the next morning. A fisherman said he saw a glowing bird fly past the lighthouse. A hiker reported finding a broken staff buried under a tree. An older man from the next town claimed a tree on his property had started growing leaves that hadn't been seen since before the Ice Age. Something had changed. The world felt older and newer at once. At school, Mira barely listened in class. The lessons felt flat now, like stories written without understanding. She still did her homework, still answered when her name was called, but part of her stayed out there in the forest, beside the pillar of stone and the echoes of something bigger. The young Archaeopteryx came to visit every day. Sometimes it stayed for hours, sometimes only minutes. It never came inside the house but waited near the back fence or in the tallest tree nearby. Mira always knew when it arrived. She could feel it. Like a thread pulling at her thoughts. Her mother began sending reports to universities and research teams. She included video, samples, and photographs. But she didn't send the full truth. Not the visions. Not the memories. Not the way time itself had bent. Some things, she said, are not meant for labs. Mira agreed. One evening, as the last light faded from the sky, the older Archaeopteryx appeared again. It hovered above the field, then landed beside Mira where she stood near the garden. The younger one came moments later and sat across from them. Then the older bird let out a new sound. Not sharp or loud. It was deep and low. A song, not a call. The ground shimmered beneath them. The trees bent slightly inward. Mira closed her eyes. She saw a place not bound by time. A place where all creatures walked together. Wings touched water, fire climbed vines, and creatures that had never met shared the same sky. Then she saw a city. It was not built of stone or metal but of light and song. In that city stood a doorway, carved into a hill. The Archaeopteryx flew toward it. Mira opened her eyes. She looked at the older creature. "You want me to follow?" It nodded once. Her mother stepped outside. "You don't have to go," she said gently. "You've already done so much." "I think I do," Mira said. "They need someone to carry what comes next." The young Archaeopteryx chirped and jumped to her shoulder. The moment it touched her, a wave of peace flooded her chest. She turned to her mother. "I'll come back." "I believe you," her mother said. Then Mira walked with the two creatures across the darkening field, toward the cliffs, and into the trees. The stars began to glow. A path opened before them, not paved, not marked, just known. She followed it. They passed the stone again, now dull and silent. They moved beyond the trees where no one went, where the forest grew thicker and older. Roots twisted through the soil. Strange shapes shimmered in the dark. The younger Archaeopteryx led the way. Then they came to the hill. It looked like nothing. Just grass, rock, and moss. But as they stepped closer, the hill shifted. A seam appeared. A door without hinges or handles slid open with no sound. Beyond it was not darkness but a soft glow like moonlight through water. Mira took a breath and stepped inside. The inside of the hill was wider than it appeared. The walls were smooth and warm to the touch. Soft light pulsed from lines in the stone like the glow of veins beneath skin. The air felt rich and alive. It carried the scent of wet earth and fire long cooled. Mira stepped forward slowly. The younger Archaeopteryx remained close. The older one flew ahead, its wings leaving a trail of faint light as it moved deeper into the space. They entered a wide chamber carved from crystal and bone. The ceiling rose like the inside of a dome. Symbols covered the walls. They moved as if alive. Not writing. Memory. In the center of the room stood a pool of water. Perfectly still. At its edge sat an empty nest woven with silver thread and dried ferns. The older Archaeopteryx landed beside it. It looked at Mira and lowered its head. The young one flew from her shoulder and landed in the nest. Mira felt a shift in her chest. The nest began to glow. Threads lit up one by one. The walls pulsed in rhythm. The water in the pool shimmered and changed. She saw images in it. Her own face. Her mother's eyes. The cliffs. The egg. The forest. Then further back. The volcano. The jungle. The first flight ever taken. The chamber was not a room. It was a memory keeper. The older Archaeopteryx let out a soft call. Mira knelt beside the pool. A ripple spread across the surface. She saw the city again. The city of light and song. But this time it was not still. Creatures moved through it. Not humans. Not fully. They were something in between. Carriers of memory. Of balance. One of them turned and looked at her. She saw herself in its face. You were never just chosen, the voice said inside her. You were returned. Mira understood then. This wasn't about preserving the past. It was about restoring the connection that had been broken. The Archaeopteryx were not just ancient creatures. They were messengers. Guardians of the bridge between what was and what could be. And she was now part of that bridge. The nest's glow faded as the young Archaeopteryx curled into sleep. The room dimmed to quiet light. The older one flew once around the dome, then landed beside Mira and brushed its head against her shoulder. I will carry this, she said aloud. I will remember. She walked back through the chamber and out into the night. The stars were brighter than she had ever seen. The trees bowed in silence. The path behind her closed as she stepped into the field again. Her mother stood waiting. Mira walked to her and wrapped her arms around her waist. Neither said a word. From that day on, the world did not change in sudden ways, but it changed in quiet ones. Birdsong became richer. Winds moved with purpose. Children in distant places began drawing creatures with wings and claws they had never learned about in books. Paleontologists found fossils that shimmered under moonlight but turned dull in the sun. Mira returned to the cliffs every morning. The young Archaeopteryx flew with her now. It grew stronger. Its feathers brighter. People came to ask questions, but she answered only some of them. Others she left buried in silence. Some truths could not be explained. Only shared. She kept a journal filled with sketches and dreams. Some nights she wrote entire pages without remembering the words. She kept it hidden under her bed. Years passed. Mira grew older. The young Archaeopteryx stayed beside her through it all. It never left. Not fully. Sometimes it vanished for days but always returned. Its eyes held stories even when it made no sound. One spring morning, as the first light touched the sea, Mira climbed the cliffs alone. She stood where she had once seen a fossil carved into stone. Now the rock was smooth. She looked to the sky and saw a shape above her. It was not the young one. It was new. A third Archaeopteryx soared across the dawn. Mira smiled. The memory had passed again. The balance was holding. She closed her eyes and felt the air. She didn't need wings to know what flight meant. She only needed the sky and the wind and the heartbeat of a world that had never forgotten its first breath.